From Washington, D.C., this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Hena Zuberi. First, the headlines. Tonga cut off by volcanic blast, fears grow for coastal towns. While millions died in pandemic, world's top 10 richest men doubled in wealth, says Oxfam. French presidential candidate Eric Zemmour convicted of hate crime. Biden's first year in office has been a mixed bag for Muslims. Saudi female engineer wins international award for inventing cancer-detecting chip. Our top story tonight. The volcano that erupted on the Pacific island nation of Tonga has almost disappeared from view, new images revealed on Tuesday. Swaths of the country are smothered in gray ash and dust or damaged by a tsunami. Tonga is still virtually cut off from the rest of the world since Saturday's Hunga Tonga Hunga Haipai volcanic explosion. The country's small outer island suffered extensive damage from the massive volcanic eruption and tsunami. The entire village was destroyed and many buildings are missing. 3 days since the explosion, emergency relief efforts have stalled. Phone lines are still down and an undersea internet cable that was cut is not expected to be repaired for weeks. Fragments of information have filtered out via a handful of satellite phones in Tonga, which is home to little more than 100,000 people. The true toll of the disaster is yet unknown. Oxfam International's latest report on global inequality shows how 21,000 people died each day of the pandemic, while the wealthiest collectively got $1.2 billion richer. Using data from Forbes, the report found that 10 richest people in the world more than doubled their collective wealth since COVID-19 hit in March of 2020. Meanwhile, the incomes of 99% of the world's population fell. Over 160 million people were forced into poverty, and billions of the world's poorest were denied access to life-saving vaccines. French presidential candidate Eric Zemmour has been fined 10,000 euros for provoking racial hatred. Zemmour was convicted Monday by the Paris criminal court after he described migrants as thieves, murderers, and rapists on a French news channel in September 2020. This is the third time Zemmour has been convicted of a hate offense. Despite that, he's still running at 11% in the polls ahead of this April's election. Zemmour complained on social media his freedom of speech has been restricted. He said there was an urgent need to drive ideology out of the courts. Human rights lawyer Ari Alimi said Zemmour's political agenda is fueled by hate. Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan told Russian Prime Minister Vladimir Putin that Muslims supported his words about the Prophet Muhammad, the Kremlin press service said Monday. Putin's statements were made during an annual press conference on December 23rd. He spoke about the inadmissibility of any act under the cover of freedom of expression that degraded the dignity of particular religious, national, or social groups. Putin also said insulting the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, violated the freedom of religion as well as the sacred feelings of people who profess Islam. Putin's comments received widespread support in the Islamic world. The Kremlin noted Putin said Russia historically had been a national, multinational, and multi-confessional state where peoples of various religions, including Islam, could coexist. However, in reality, Russia has a history of persecuting Muslims from the Tatars, the Uzbeks, the Tajiks, Kyrgyz, in places like Chechnya, Dagestan, and Georgia. Under Stalin's militant atheism, sacked churches, synagogues, and mosques were transformed into anti-religious museums of atheism. Millions died or were deported. During the 2016 presidential election campaign, some U.S. politicians made Muslims the bogeyman, said a former Hillary Clinton staffer. Homa Abedin, Clinton's chief of staff, said she endured calls for her investigation by a Republican congressman in 2012 because she and her family were practicing Muslims. The prejudice intensified throughout the election campaign of former President Donald Trump, she told Arab News. The experience was really an appetizer for what was to come, Abedin said. Abedin recently published a memoir about her experiences in U.S. politics and growing up in Saudi Arabia. She writes about anti-Muslim prejudice in politics in her book, Both and A Life in Many Worlds. Israeli police were in a standoff Monday with a Palestinian man who carried a gas canister onto the roof of his home in Jerusalem. The man's family has been facing the threat of eviction since 2017 in the Flashpoint Sheikh Jarrah area of Israel-annexed East Jerusalem. Israeli media reported Mohammed Salhiya had threatened to set himself on fire if the eviction order was carried out. The family has lived in the home since the 1950s. It is situated on land now allocated for school construction by the Israeli government. Police said that the Jerusalem municipality said that the Salhiyas had ignored countless opportunities to vacate the land as ordered. U.S. President Joe Biden urged Americans to work to safeguard voting rights while commemorating the life and work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on Monday. Biden said it's not enough to just praise King on the federal holiday honoring him. He added Americans must commit to his unfinished work to deliver jobs and justice, to protect the sacred right to vote, the right from which all other rights flow. Biden said voter suppression and election subversion are concerns with the onslaught of Republican anti-voting laws in a number of states. The family of the slain civil rights leader and their supporters marched in Washington on Monday, urging passage of a law to protect voters from racial discrimination. Two major pieces of voting rights legislation have stalled in Congress amid widespread Republican opposition. U.S. President Joe Biden's presidency has been a mixed bag for the American Muslim community. While campaigning, Biden promised to end the Trump administration's discriminatory Muslim and African travel bans. He later signed a proclamation overturning them. Biden has also appointed several American Muslims to high-level government positions. However, there are no Muslims serving in Biden's cabinet, and he has not yet appointed a White House liaison to the American Muslim community. The Biden administration called out China's human rights abuses targeting Uyghur Muslims as genocide and signed into law the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. However, the White House has not spoken up against the persecution of Indian Muslims by India's Hindu nationalist government. A former senior officer in Spain's National Police Corps claimed the 2017 terror attacks in Barcelona and Cambrils were organized by the country's secret service. José Manuel Villarejo said that the attacks were a bid to destabilize Catalonia before the independence referendum there. The attacks in August of that year included a truck running over pedestrians on La Rambla in Barcelona. A total of 16 people died in the attacks as 5 members, reportedly from an extremist cell, launched a knife attack on the beachfront at Cambrils. All 5 men were shot dead by police. 3 men who helped the attacks were sentenced between 8 and 53 years in jail. Dozens of freight cars are broken into every day on Los Angeles railways by thieves who take advantage of the train stops to loot packages bought online. They leave thousands of gutted boxes and products that will never reach their destination. Tags found Friday by an AFP team on a track near the city center showed many major U.S. mail order and courier companies such as Amazon, Target, UPS, and FedEx are being hit. Thefts have exploded in recent months. The thieves wait until the long freight trains are immobilized on the tracks and then climb onto the containers, breaking locks with bolt cutters. Police and security agents have arrested more than 100 people in the last 3 months of 2021 for trespassing and vandalizing Union Pacific trains. A Saudi engineer won the Innovator Under 35 award for developing a microchip that can detect different types of cancer in the body. Dana al-Sulaiman is an assistant professor of material science and bioengineering at King Abdullah University of Science and Technology in Saudi Arabia. According to MIT Technology Review, Arabia's website, she was awarded for her work described as a functional hydrogel-coated microneedle platform. The 28-year-old told the Al-Ikhbariya channel it is a small chip made of microneedles covered with a substance that is placed on the skin. It enables rapid and non-invasive sampling and detection of cancer-specific biomarkers from the skin's interstitial fluid. Al-Sulaiman's invention has been granted a U.S. patent. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
I am what hunger looks like in America.
I am an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for the last day of school. Because this may be the last time I'll have lunch. Till September.
I am a single father of 2 who works 3 part-time jobs,
and that's still not enough to put food on the table.
I was created by artificial intelligence from faces of the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger.
Feeding America, 200 food banks strong.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. In today's in-depth analysis segment, we're going to discuss the civil rights movement and the contributions of Martin Luther King Jr. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you, Hena. MLK was not MLK when he was born. His father changed his name, which used to be Michael. And that's how he changed his son's name with the word Junior. It's a memory a lot of Americans cherish. Muslim Americans were part of civil rights movement. They were among the prominent names at that time. What is it which Muslims can learn today? Someone who grew up in the home of civil rights movement, who is the editor of the only Muslim weekly which we have in America, Muslim Journal. Sister AYESHA K. MUSTAFAA is with us. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam, sir. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you. Thank you for sparing your time. So And what are your memories of growing up when Dr. King was marching around the country?
Well, I was a young girl growing up in Mississippi, specifically in the area of Canton, Mississippi. My father was a civil rights advocate and worker, on the ground soldier. And we knew that we were in desperate times, literally, young African-American children. And that's why Dr. King spoke so poignantly about young children having their rights in his speech, I Have a Dream. But conditions and circumstances were dire. They were critical. You know, we didn't just get voting rights, the right to even in a restaurant to sit at a counter. We didn't have those rights automatically. We weren't born with those rights. So the men and women like Dr. Martin Luther King, like my father, like so many others who have also paid the ultimate price, they paid a hefty price just for us to have basic rights in this country, the country that we were born in the country that our foreparents were brought here enslaved, we being the descendants of slaves, but yet we, with the Emancipation Proclamation, did not bring us all our full citizenship rights. So it was men like Dr. King who marshaled on the movement until we got full citizenship rights that we have to continue to protect today and advance today and shepherd today.
You know, when was the first time you came to know about I Have a Dream speech? Was it in a school? Was it instantaneously in the school, or you knew it outside the school?
The Dr. King speech was on August 28, 1963. And it was broadcast. That movement at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., keep in mind now, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have social media, we didn't have Facebook, Instagram, but the crowd was phenomenally large, and the people poured out in D.C. at the Lincoln Memorial, and it became a mainstay. August 28, 1963. I was giving my age away. I was 12 years old. And it permeated the air. You know, if we had a radio, it was most of the radio and the news and the newspapers that emphasized the speech of Dr. King. Some of the media were against the civil rights movement, and they would not broadcast it fairly. They would not give him his full coverage in the media. So even among those in the media, it was a struggle. Those who would promote Dr. King's message and bring it to the forefront, and those who would try to stifle it, to keep it away from us.
What, you know, whatever is happening in our country today, what do you think he will be the most disappointed by if he was living today?
The most disappointment as we are facing now is the write-in votes issues, the issues that are facing us with write-in votes, and the potential for it to backslide. You know, the former President Barack Obama and Eric Holder, the former Attorney General, work on a program that's called All on the Line, and it monitors and emphasizes to keep an eye on gerrymandering. We have the right to vote that Dr. King marshaled in and literally paid for it ultimately with his life. We have the right to vote, but even now, those rights can be diluted, not directly taken away, but they can be presented in such a way that you don't have the full force of the right to vote. For gerrymandering in our communities, we see them redrawing voting district maps, and they're drawing them in a way that a contortionist must have drawn them, because they're dividing groups up where they would dilute the Black vote, they will dilute the Hispanic vote, they would emphasize white Americans' votes. And just as Donald Trump mentioned in his last piece that he posted on air. Now you have to watch who's counting the vote. And these types of things would disenfranchise people as much as the laws that, the Jim Crow laws that didn't allow African Americans to vote. Back then, my father would have been asked when he went to the voting polls, tell me how many jelly beans are in this jar. That was the test that Black men were given when they went to vote. Nowadays, you don't have those kind of tests, but the diluting of the ability to get to the polls and to have polls within your district, like some districts in Texas, they say in one county, they only have one polling station, one polling precinct available for a whole county. So these types of things where you have the right to vote, but there are obstacles put in your way to get to the polls. And I think that would be very troubling to Dr. King at this time.
I mean, the Democrats have promised that by this MLK Day, they will have a voting right legislation. They don't have anything like that. And that's the reason probably when President Biden went to Georgia, I mean, a whole lot of leaders didn't even show up because that is one thing which is so basic to democracy, right to vote. And here it was not given. It requires a struggle. It requires martyrs. It requires lynching. I mean, when you go to the museum in Montgomery, Alabama, where, you know, the lynching monuments and all of that, and you see, man, just to vote, you have to go through all of that. And now it seems to be in a reverse gear. So I fully agree with you on that. What are the lessons for the Muslim community from the struggle of civil rights movement and Dr. King?
The lesson is to know the history of the country that you are coming into. As an immigrant and as a Muslim, you have the right to the full citizenship of this country. However, you should also know the history and be, as Dr. King and the civil rights people say, and be on the right side of history. And these civil rights laws that Dr. King and so many died for trying to establish and to get passed, these are the very same civil rights laws that immigrants from any country of any walk of life can use also to defend their own rights. And so we have to know this very basic history. And it is a hard history to understand, because now as we see with the many school districts are pushing back against having certain parts of our history taught in the schools, because as one person said, one white gentleman said, you're going to have our children hating us. So imagine that your history is so bad that you fear that if it's taught in its accuracy, that your children will actually grow up to hate you. And that's not just an off-the-cuff remark, because there were certain circumstances. For example, the Birmingham church bombing in Birmingham, Alabama, there were 4 little Black girls at church that morning, and they were killed in the church bombing that was set off by white Klansmen in Birmingham. When years later, the men who did that bombing were not prosecuted for the murders of those 4 girls. But years later, one of them was bragging about the bombing at his home residence, and his granddaughter, a young white girl, heard it, and she was so disgusted until she turned her grandfather in. She said that she could testify that she had heard him say that he was responsible for that bombing that killed those 4 young girls. And years later, she appeared on Oprah Winfrey with the sister of one of the bomb victims of that church. But true enough, we're not saying that everybody is cut from the quote unquote the same cloth. Some people will be moved in different ways by this history, but it's a history that we must share and let it have its impact on those who want to advance good or promote civil rights.
One part of that history is that it was not Dr. King who challenged the racial immigration policies there will not be many of the Asians who are in this country at this moment. He was the one during the civil rights movement challenged the racial policies of immigration as well. What will be, the time has passed. What are the things do you think he will, if he is here today, he will be proud of?
He would be proud that we realized and experienced having an African-American president in this country, that the voting experiences that we had actually led to a African-American lead in this country. That was no small matter from people who, the descendants of former slaves, and having to go through all of this turmoil to get the right to vote itself, and then be able to vote into office one of our own, an African American. And I think he, as has been revealed also, recently, former President Obama wrote a letter to the late Senator Harry Reid. And in that letter, Obama expressed that if it had not been for Harry Reid, his presidency would not have been possible. And so I think Dr. King would also acknowledge there were many people behind the scenes. There were many Caucasians. There were many Jewish people. There were many people from different walks of life who backed his movement, who were not in the forefront, but they were constantly backing his efforts in the civil rights efforts. And I think he would be proud that we still have those type of supporters that are not in the forefront, but they are prominent and they are strong and they are determined that this country keeps moving forward.
Well, thank you so much, Ayesha K. Mustafaa, Editor-in-Chief of the only Muslim weekly Muslim journal. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you.
Back to you, Hena.
Thank you so much, Imam Mujahid. That was Ayesha K. Mustafaa, the editor of Muslim Journal weekly newspaper. That's all from our Washington studio tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube and Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.